Scenes and Adventures in the Semi-Alpine region of the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas. 1853 by Henry Rowe, Schoolcraft. Chapter 10, Part 1, Number 21. It was the last day of the year 1818 when we reached the cave of Winoka, as described in the preceding chapter on the Ozark summit. An inspection of the country had shown the fact that the mineral developments of its underlying rocks were of a valuable character, while the surface assumed the most pleasing aspect, and the soil, wherever examined, appeared to be of the very richest quality. The bold, rough hunters who accompanied me thought of the country only as an attractive game country, which it was a great pity, they said, that the Indians alone should occupy, and they had very little curiosity about anything that did not minister to their immediate wants. They had lived for so long a time by the rifle that they had a philosophy of the rifle. It was the ready arbiter between themselves and the animal creation and the Indians, and even other hunters. Neither the striking agricultural or mineral resources of the country arrested much attention on their part, and as soon as I was ready to relinquish my examinations at the cave and proceed, they were ready to resume their horses and lead forward. Unfortunately, it was now severely cold, and everything in the heavens prognosticated its increase in severity. On leaving the valley of the cave and ascending the hills that environed it, we passed over a gently sloping surface of hill and vale, partly covered with forest trees and partly in prairies. I have seldom seen a more beautiful prospect. The various species of oaks and hickories had strewed the woods with their fruits, on which the bear and wild turkey reveled, while the red deer was scarcely ever out of sight. Long before the hour of encampment had arrived, the hunters had secured the means of our making a sumptuous evening meal on wild viands, and when, at an early hour, we pitched our camp on the borders of a small brook, Holt, who was ever ready with the rifle, added a fat brant from this brook to our stores. We had not traveled more than 12 miles, but we had a sharp wind to face, the day being severe, and nothing was so agreeable when we halted as the fire, around which we enjoyed ourselves as we each displayed our skill in forest cookery. There was cutting and carving and roasting in the true prairie style. We then prepared our couches and night fires and slept. At the earliest peep of light, we were again in motion. The 1st of January, 1819, opened with a degree of cold unusual in these regions. Their elevation is indeed considerable, but the wind swept with a cutting force across the open prairies. We were now on the principal northwestern source of White River, the channel of which we forded in the distance of 2 miles. The western banks presented a naked prairie, covered with dry grass and autumnal weeds, with here and there a tree. We pushed on towards the northeast. The prairie hen, notwithstanding the cold, rose up in flocks before us as we intruded upon their low-couched positions in the grass. Of these, Holt, whose hunting propensities no cold could restrain, obtained a specimen. He also fired at and killed a wild goose from the channel of the river. On passing about 4 miles up the western banks of the stream, we observed a lead of lead ore glittering through the water in the bed of the river, and determined to encamp at this spot for the purpose of investigating the mineral appearances. The weather was piercingly cold. We found some old Indian camps near at hand, and procured from them pieces of bark to sheath a few poles and stakes hastily put up to form a shelter from the wind. A fire was soon kindled, and while we cooked and partook of a forest breakfast, we recounted the incidents of the morning, not omitting the untoward state of the weather. When the labor of building the shanty was completed, I hastened to explore the geological indications of the vicinity. The ore which had attracted our notice in the bed of the stream existed in lumps, which presented bright surfaces where the force of the current had impelled its loose stony materials over them. It was a pure sulphuret of lead breaking in cubical lines. I also observed some pieces of hornblende. It was not easy to determine the original width of the bed of ore. Its course is across the stream into the banks of red marly clay on which we had encamped. Its geological position is in every respect similar to the metalliferous deposits at Potosi, except that there were no spars, calcareous, or barytic in sight. I gathered in a few minutes a sufficient number of specimens of the ore for examination, and employed myself in erecting on the banks of the river a small furnace of the kind called log furnace in Missouri, to test its fusibility. In the meantime, my New England companion took a survey of the surrounding country, which he pronounced one of the most fertile and admirably adapted to every purpose of agriculture. Much of the land consists of prairie, into which the plow can be immediately put. The forests and groves, which are interspersed with a park-like beauty through these prairies, consist of various species of oaks, maple, white and black walnut, elm, mulberry, hackberry, and sycamore. Holt and Fisher scanned the country for game and returned to camp with 6 turkeys and a wolf. Their fear of the Osages had been only apparently subdued. They had been constantly on the lookout for signs of Indian enemies, and had their minds always filled with notions of hovering Osages and Pawnees. The day was wintry and the weather variable. It commenced snowing at daylight and continued till about 8 o'clock a.m. It then became clear, and remained so with occasional flickerings until 2 o'clock, when a fixed snowstorm sat in and drove me from my little unfinished furnace, bringing in the hunters also from the prairies, and confining us strictly to our camp. This storm continued, without mitigation, nearly all night. January 3rd. The snow ceased before sunrise, leaving the country wrapped in a white mantle. The morning was cold. The river began to freeze about 9 o'clock and continued till it was closed. The weather afforded an opportunity for continuing the explorations and examinations commenced yesterday. I found that the red clay afforded a good material for laying the stones of my lead furnace, and continued working at it for a part of the day. The hunters came in with the carcasses of 2 deer and the skin of a black wolf. Except in its color, I could not distinguish any permanent characteristics in the latter differing from the large gray wolf or coyote. Its claws, snout, and ears were the same. Its tail, perhaps, a little more bushy. The size of this animal, judging from the skin, must have been double that of the little prairie wolf or Maingan of the Indians of the North. I found the bed of the stream, where it permitted examination, to be non-crystalline limestone in horizontal beds, corresponding to the formation observed in the cave of Winoka. Its mineral constituents were much the same. The country is one that must be valuable hereafter for its fertility and resources. The prairies which extend west of the river are the most extensive, rich, and beautiful of any which I have yet seen west of the Mississippi. They are covered with the most vigorous growth of grass. The deer and elk abound in this quarter, and the buffalo is yet occasionally seen. The soil in the river valley is a rich black alluvium. The trees are often of an immense height, denoting strength of soil. It will probably be found adapted to corn, flax, hemp, wheat, oats, and potatoes, while its minor resources must come in as one of the elements of its future prosperity. I planted some peach stones in a fertile spot near our camp, where the growth of the sumac denoted unusual fertility, and it is worthy of remark that even Holt, who had the antipathy of an Indian to agriculture, actually cut some bushes in a certain spot near a spring and piled them into a heap by way of securing a preemption right to the soil. The region of the Ozark range of mountain development is one of singular features and no small attractions. It exhibits a vast and elevated tract of horizontal and sedimentary strata, extended for hundreds of miles north and south. This range is broken up into high cliffs, often wonderful to behold, which form the enclosing walls of river valleys. The Arkansas itself forces its way through about the center of the range. The Washita marks its southern boundary. The St. Francis and the Merrimack, at the mouth of the former, of which De Soto landed, constitute its northern limits. The junction of the Missouri with the Mississippi may be said to be its extreme northern development. The Missouri, from the influx of the Osage, is pushed northward by the Ozark Range. It rests on the south upon the primitive granite slabs and quartz rock of Washita. The celebrated hot springs issue from it. The long-noted mines of Missouri, which once set opinion in France in a blaze, extend from its northeastern flanks. The primitive siennites and hornblende rock of the sources of the St. Francis and Grand Rivers support it. The Unica, or White River, the Strawberry, Spring River, Currents, and Black Rivers descend from it and join the Mississippi. The Great and Little Osage and the Gasconade flow into the Missouri. The Great Plains and Sand Desert, which stretches at the eastern foot of the Rocky Mountains, lie west of it. It is not less than 200 miles in breadth. No part of the central regions of the Mississippi Valley exhibits such a variety in its geological constituents, or such a striking mineralogical development. Its bodies of the ore of iron, called ironclasts, are unparalleled. These are particularly developed in the locality called Iron Mountain, or the sources of the St. Francis. Its ores of lead, zinc, antimony, and manganese are remarkable. Its limestones abound in caves yielding niter. Salt and gypsum are found in the plains on its western borders. Its large blocks of quartz rock, which are found north of the Arkansas River, particularly scattered over the formations crossing the Little Red, Buffalo, and White Rivers about the Buffalo Shoals, furnish indications of the diluvial gold deposit, which would justify future examination. Through these alpine ranges De Soto roved, with his chivalrous and untiring army, making an outward and inward expedition into regions which must have presented unwanted hardships and discouragements to the march of troops. To add to these natural obstacles, he found himself opposed by fierce savage tribes who rushed upon him from every glen and defile and met him in the open grounds with the most savage energy. His own health finally sank under these fatigues, and it is certain that after his death his successor in the command, Moscoso, once more marched entirely through the southern Ozarks and reached the Buffalo Plains beyond them. Such energy and feats of daring had never before been displayed in North America, and the wonder is at its highest after beholding the wild and rough mountains, cliffs, glens, and torrents over which the actual marches must have laid. Some of the names of the Indian tribes encountered by him furnish conclusive evidence that the principal tribes of the country, although they have changed their particular locations since the year 1542, still occupy the region. Thus, the Capahas, who then lived on the Mississippi, above the St. Francis, are identical with the Quapas, the Cayas with the Kansas, and the Kipana with the Pawnees.